This week on the P&R Churchman, I don't have a ruling elder on. I have something completely different, somebody completely different. He's a good friend of mine, teaching elder in South Florida, Aldo Leon. Buddy, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. I'm wonderful.
So, good. So everybody knows, I always say my niche in this podcasting world in the PCA is ruling elders and churchmanship. And but I have very good access to you. And you're one of my closest friends. That's what I tell people. And
this is true.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. So I appreciate you, and I want to promote what you're doing, but I also want to give you a little bit of a voice. And so this is why I have you on. You have a podcast. What's your podcast called?
It's called Kingdom Polemics.
Kingdom Polemics. And so you guys can check that out. It is long form content. Rogan. Although he tries to rival Joe Rogan. And why do one episode on something when you can do four? So
yeah. Or you can do 4 episodes in one.
Or that.
Yeah.
Or that. So I have had you on my other podcast, Grace to Stand, which is mostly for my church. And the reason I had you on that is we were talking about missions, because you are a missions conference speaker a year ago or 2 years ago now. I guess it was 2 years ago. And really encouraging to our people. And I've been on your podcast a number of times, and I've appreciated that. But this is the first time you're on this one. And the reason why is because the question of the day is, what on earth is going on with Aldo? Or is Aldo okay? And people know we're friends, and I get these questions, and there's people are concerned, confused. You know, I try to answer what I can, but I always say, look, he loves it when people reach out to him about these things. I found you very open to a number of different people who have privately reached out to you, and so have you had those questions lately?
Yeah. I mean, over the years, I've received messages and emails, and some of it's what's going on in a good way. Like, wow, this is things that I've seen you grow and progress and mature in. Is what's going on. This is great. I find it helpful. I love your journey and your focusing on things, and others has been, the negative, like, what are you doing? What's going on? And so, yeah, I hear that, but I think other people hear it more than me, to be honest. I feel like a lot of people that you said were like, what's up with him? Like, I don't hear it from them, so.
Well, but some people reached out and asked if you were okay, right?
Yeah. There's this guy in the Carolinas. He called me up and he was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" I won't say his name. I will not name his name. He knows who he is.
You know what I love, and I'm honestly, like, I'm not knocking people when they do this. I think it is a good way to do it. But the "Are you okay?" way of broaching the subject, I find funny. Like, because you're okay, right? Is everything okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Well, okay. It depends on what that means. Like, that question is loaded. So how you define what okay is would inform how you believe that response is what it is. So yeah, I think I'm okay, but you know what? Like, a lot of people that aren't okay, like, they think they're okay. So I don't know.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of the "Are you okay?" thing. So, I have an associate pastor here, Pablo Ayan. He's from Peru. Dude loves the Lord. He's great with people. He's a super big help. And obviously he's Hispanic, and he was born in Peru. And he went to Covenant Seminary, and so all of his friends from, I don't know, it's over a dozen years old now, when they saw he was working with me, And then when he would, like, he'd go to GRN events and he'd post pictures of himself with the GRN banner behind himself and he'd put it online. And all these people came out of the woodwork from like his past, people he hadn't heard of in 10 and 15 years, and saying, "Are you okay? I'm praying for you." And what's the implication? Like, they haven't talked to this dude in like a dozen years, but because he put a picture, or because he's associated with me, they want to know if he's all right. Like, am I abusing him or something? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes "are you okay" means like, you don't seem to be in my sphere of categories anymore. That's what a lot of times that question is. Like, are you in my circle of distinctiveness? And so that's probably what was around that guy. He's around this guy who's in this place with these people with these distinctives, and these people that have other particularities are like, "Are you all right?" And the question is like, are you us? Are you us?
That, you know? Yeah, that's it. You know, I think, and we'll probably get into this, like, there is an interesting thing going on in the PCA. You know, that when there's a big issue, it consolidates sides, as it were, whatever. And for a few years there, a number of years, almost 5, we had the Revoice Side B, Greg Johnson controversy that really coalesced the conservative side with the confessional group. And, you know, obviously those are circles you and I run in. We're considered right of center, or even further than that. And your ministry in particular, you've been asked to speak at events. Your podcast is very popular. You speak and preach with a boldness, and, you know, people are encouraged by that, particularly conservatives. And like, you know, you're not the typical, you're just not the poster child PCA pastor. I don't think I am either, you know? And so there's something encouraging about a guy who's younger, even though you're getting older, Aldo, and I can,
42.
You're 42.
41 or 42. I don't know.
Yeah, that was yesterday for me, and now I'm staring down the barrel of 50. And so, like, there's like, oh, this is great. We're kind of in this. And I would say over the last year, as the Side B stuff has sort of waned, or people think it's dealt with or whatever, it's showing some maybe differences or cracks in the conservative group of guys. And so I think, like, for you've tweeted or podcast a number of things that have offended people on the right. Would you say, I mean, am I saying something you're unaware of, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm very aware of, I mean, Twitter is where everyone speaks their mind, you know? So yeah, I would say that's fair to say.
And what are those issues around?
I mean, I've heard very strong pushback on optimistic eschatology. That is not as popular, but I wouldn't say that's one I hear the most. But I've heard things about postmodernism that are very, very negative. I've heard a lot of pushback on the establishment principle, you know, the view that Christ relates to people more than individualistically or ecclesiologically, but there is a national conception of the Lordship of Christ that is received negatively. That's probably one of the more numerous ones. Psalm singing, is making a case for exclusive psalmody, has been responded to negatively. Republication and just speaking about radical two kingdom distinctives in general, you know, has been responded to negatively. So things like that would be, but then just there's, I don't know, I think sometimes it's just random stuff, like me saying that dispensationalism undermines the gospel. Like you'll have people in the PCA be like, I don't think you should say that. And I'm like, it does. So yeah, there's some of that. Some of that strong pushback about things that I believe are just historic views that are part of our tribe or our denominational history.
So when you were talking about the eschatology or establishment principle, I mean, there's almost a correlation between, the rise of Christian nationalism and whatever that is, and anything that sniffs of it. Do you see, like, is that part of it? Like,
yeah, but I do think, yeah, so I think what you're saying is like, do you think the concern about that is about the broader rising of this cultural engagement, Christ and nation conversation that has a lot of strange goons in it? Yeah, I do, but let me just be honest. People that know me know that I don't fall into that category. They know that I'm not in the Wilson world of that conversation. They know I'm not in like the the generic Fox News cultural Christianity side of that conversation. They know I'm not in the Reconstructionist side of that conversation. Like they know that I'm coming from it from a confessional angle, and nonetheless, the harsh or strong pushback is there. So I don't think I don't think it's fair to say that people in the NAPARC world that have an issue with some of those views being promoted publicly would believe that like I would be classifiable in that stream of broader strangeness. So that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I've seen it. Yeah, I know you. I mean, you took the American flag. One of the first things you did when you were at Pinelands was take the American flag out of the sanctuary.
Yeah,
people were looking for it, right?
yeah. That was like year one.
Yeah,
in July. I was like, that's not happening. I'm not preaching. I'm not preaching through flags.
right. And so, people, like you said, people who know you know that, but I've seen like the attacks about Christian nationalism when you're just holding out like a post-mill eschatology and a belief that our faith should inform our public lives,
Yeah. Like just like our divines who wrote our standards. Another thing that actually has come up, I think the imprecatory element of our piety, people have an issue with that. I don't know. It seems like whenever you speak about something political, something national, something imprecatory, it's almost like you have spoken about this, therefore thou necessarily does emphasize political, national at the expense of ecclesiological. You speak about imprecatory things about Christ's rule and reign, therefore you don't have a preoccupation with making disciples. What I've noticed is in the Reform world, there is this great issue of being unable to hold many things together at the same time without those things that are held that may be different somehow excluding or canceling the other, right? So you speak about Christ's kingship over magistrates, and all of a sudden you can no longer be gospel-centered or gospel-centric, or you speak about God's holy indignation and hatred and temporal judgments over the ungodly, and we are no longer missional and mindful of the mercy of God. And I think my understanding of where we come from is that we can walk and chew gum. We can do all these things at the same time. And I don't know, it's just what I've noticed is that just there is so much hobby horse microscopic monopolizing Christianity, which just feels that we have to be something and not something else. And we have to totally dismantle and dismiss something in order to promote something. Or if somebody promotes something in an unhealthy way, let's say Christ's lordship over culture, let's say if there's a lot of strange theology that is doing that, in order for us to be orthodox, we must have nothing to do with that. So for example, we have, patriarchy promoted, I think, unhealthily by, a Wilson type person that I don't agree with his view of patriarchy, and all of a sudden we have to make a negative, robust, emphatic conversations about men being men and ruling the world and homes because there is somebody who is promoting this that has a bunch of baggage. And so I guess for me, I am trying my best to not be somebody who is promoting something as a reactionary person, or dismissing something because people are abusing something. Like patriarchy belongs to me. Optimistic eschatology and Christ's kingship over the nations belongs to me and my tradition and my history. It doesn't belong to all the wackadoodles around that are, doing it. And so, anyways, that's just a lot of my thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, but you see how you sort of people can't easily stick you in a bucket, they can't stick you in the, so Christian nationalism, and now it's all this, they're neo-Confederates and it's as white supremacists. And of course you're Hispanic. So, that you don't fit that, you are.
And I also, don't have like this, let's put it this way. I don't share the American Presbyterian history's somewhat softness and ambivalence and all over the placeness with slavery either, So I wouldn't, I think it's absolute foolishness for someone like Wilson in that book he made with, was it Wilkins? That one of the greatest demonstrations of hierarchical distinctions amongst different people being exemplary of love and affection is seen in American chattel slavery. That kind of stuff is just repulsive to me, So yeah, I wouldn't, I'm very much a Christian nationalist because I am truly Reformed. I am a subscriber to the Westminster Standards, who were all Christian nationalists. But any nationalism that is about that is, I don't see that as being Reformed or biblical. So.
Right, and you've mentioned Doug Wilson a number of times, and so you're post-mill, he's post-mill. You share. There are some similarities on what could be expected in culture, but you are very outspoken against him. So you can't. It's not like you can be grouped into his group either.
No, I don't think that would be appropriate because soteriology and your Christology, right, are very essentially informative as to how your second table views are, how you organize and perceive spheres. And he has aberrant Christology, aberrant soteriology, and therefore your view of spheres and how they interact are going to be very different. But the thing is, things can sound similar when they're not, and that's what Satan does. He's very smart. I mean, I'm not trying to compliment the devil, but making things look very similar that are not very similar is a very strategic thing to do.
It's crafty. It's serpent-like. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, you see that? That's why Edwards writes so much in The Awakening, because a lot of real revival was happening, and in the midst of that, a lot of strange revival was happening. And so a lot of people were ready to dismiss revival entirely because of the strange things that were all intermixed, right? So
that's interesting. analogy to today for sure, because there's a lot of things being dismissed because some of the greatest most outspoken people for them are aberrant, and so they're attracting the wrong type of people, for instance. And so then, like you said, there's this reaction against it. And you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I guess the saying is, a lot of this has to do with, you mentioned it already, the R2K, theology, Reformed or Radical Two Kingdoms, theology, and how they view not just eschatology, but then culture itself. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm writing a book about R2K theology, and their aberrance theologically, it is very extensive. Their view of creation is incorrect. Their view of law and gospel is incorrect. Their view of the covenant of grace is incorrect. Their view of eschatology is incorrect. Their view of the law of God is incorrect. Their view of covenant in general is incorrect. I mean, Klein is the godfather of these folks, and when you see him say that creation was made covenantal, not as Westminster 7:1 speaks about how God made creation and then he covenants their view of the magistrate is unconfessional. Their view of spirituality is unconfessional. Like it undermines so many Reformed values in so many places. I talked to Zach Garris about this. We believe it's just as much a threat as the Moscow theology is. It's almost like they're two polarizing twins with two similar grandfathers. Like, so you have these Kleinian disciples, and then you have these Shepherdites, both reacting against one another and convincing the rest of us that their group actually is the historic group when it's not. And here's the thing about like the R2K theology. I talked to a lot of pastors, many of them across NAPARC, and they agree that their views are dangerous, but they don't talk about it in public, because
Yeah.
I mean, these are guys that like are respected theologians and they teach at respectable seminaries. I'm just more simple. I think if you're promoting things that undermine confessional integrity, we should talk about it in public, honestly, and hope that through those, Reformed people used to write letters to each other and call each other out all the time. And I don't know, I think now it's just, we're so obsessed with the boat not being rocked when it comes to people that are more on the right side, So if someone would be considered more on your side of the conversation, the last thing you want to do is say, hey, so-and-so, whatever, whoever you consider to be more on your side, what are you doing, And I think that one of the reasons why we in the PCA, for example, are pushing people away to unhealthy spectrums of evangelicalism is because there's things in our midst that are really bad, and that we don't seem to deal with because we have bigger problems. And so, I don't know, I think that part of us being reformed is that we're reforming not just the people that are the most obviously strange, but we're having hard conversations amongst ourselves. We're pushing each other, who would see each other as more in the line of orthodoxy, to fine-tune things, and it doesn't have to be divisive and strange for us to have those conversations. That's our history. I mean, we fight winsomely, appropriately, wisely, where we believe that our particular standards are not in line and need to be refined and more brought into conformity to what we have agreed historically to be about. So, yeah.
I mean, so what you just hit on is exactly probably part of why people are saying, hey, what's going on with Aldo or whatever. It's because this is an issue on the right. This is a divide among conservative, I guess in NAPARC, but in the PCA, certainly there's a lot of affinity with guys and the R2K theology and theologians. And so there's almost like we're not really supposed to challenge it, and you have no problem coming right out and challenging it, I guess.
No, I don't, because I feel like anything that disrupts the integrity of the church, anything that undermines vital points of doctrine, I've seen what it does to people. I've seen what it does to Christians. I've seen what it does to churches. I've seen what it's done to the people of Christ. And so if things are really unhealthy, even though, so look, you can have justification right, and you can talk about the means of grace right, but if attached to that there's all of this radically confusing or unhealthy views of essential doctrines, then I think that those things need to be addressed. They need to be fixed. They need to be repented of. Part of the reason why I see this as such a problem is it ruined my life a lot. I was very much into a lot of these pietistic, esoteric, dichotomous, hyper spiritualized, ecclesiasticized views of the kingship of Christ. I was very committed to them, and I hurt myself, my family, and my church by this compartmentalization of the Christian life. I was constantly living in some justification, law, or gospel preoccupation, and not speaking the whole counsel of God to the whole man about the whole life enough. And so I really had a come to Jesus meeting about a lot of this reform pietism when the world of COVID comes in, the BLM world comes in, the Trump madness comes in. That whole world showed me that a theology that is unhealthily, disproportionately being Christocentric in this eschatology or ecclesiology or justification, soteriology, that is dismissive of the sacredness of the Christian life in every sphere he is in a way deeply connected to the laws of Christ, right? That is very, very, very bad. Very, very bad, very dangerous. And I really realized that I had a theology that just wasn't comprehensive enough due to these things that are very much heavily promoted in our world. And I read, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is not Rutherford, this is not Gillespie, this is not Gouge, this is not even Hodge. This is very, very, very extreme and novel, and it is, interestingly, the norm. Go ahead.
So does that frustrate you? Because I think what a lot of guys that we would agree on with a lot of things think this is more of like an intramural debate. It's if there's a tier system of how to believe things, it's very low in the whole scheme of everything. By the way, we've had these conversations before. The dichotomization is and the idea that I can kind of compartmentalize my Christianity into different spheres and that there's sort of a different standard of laws for Christians and non-Christians and what the moral law really means is abhorrent to me, because it's allowed Christians to actually compartmentalize. It's the reason Christians think it's good to go to gay weddings and pride parades. It's because, well, that's this other sphere and this other kingdom, and I'm just trying to show love, and they're promoting and supporting, And I'm not saying the theologians would argue that. I'm saying this is the fruit of it. I'm not about to get into arguments with those guys, not because I don't want to offend them, because I'm not going down the rabbit trail with them. It just doesn't make sense of so much of the Bible. But what I'm asking is, you obviously think and believe that this theology, R2K, is worth vocally fighting against, as opposed to sort of having like a live and let live mentality
absolutely.
about it. Because I think that's what people are seeing, and they're like, what is going on? Why is he attacking people that we love? And
Well, the thing is, we like to separate things about Christ, but the problem is we can't. And one of the reasons why, for example, like when people talk about like, okay, you have a view of Christ's kingship, when you look at the world that is saying Christ rules over this and this and this and this and this, and everything is his, not just then but now, right? The nations are Christ now, the matters are Christ now. He is the Lord of Kings. That's Revelation 1. And there's people that basically, no, well, the nations are given to Satan, and the kings are to be neutral, and but I do believe that Christ is the Lord over the church. But here's the thing: the crown of Jesus being denied anywhere is a means for it to be denied everywhere. And this is exactly why in the Church of Scotland, they split over this. Many times they didn't see it as, well, you know what, this is just nuanced theology. This is just kind of like disagreements about like debatable things. They're like, Christ's kingship, all right, Christology, is not something that is secondary. And so to undermine Christ's rule and reign somewhere is to inevitably and necessarily undermine it everywhere. The idea that we're going to deny the law of God in certain situations, we're going to deny the crown rights of Jesus in certain situations, but then say we're still holding them here, you're denying Christ in some true way. And when a denial of Christ's royal prerogatives and his oughtness that he demands and commands over all, whenever that is undermined by his church, the inevitable end to that is an undermining of every single diadem of the crown. That's just historically true. And this is the reason why the people that, it's interesting, because now Orthodox and unorthodox people will disagree. Orthodox people will disagree about this issue. But if you go back to the times of the 1600s, 1500s, there was only one person or one type of person who was making these compartmentalized, dichotomous, extreme secularizing of things not ecclesiastical. There was one group of people or one type of person doing it, and it was always the heretics. It was the Socinians, the Anabaptists, and the Libertines, the only people that made these extreme, polarizing, dismissiveness of certain elements of Christ's oughtness and rule in segments of life were people that had an interest to promoting lawlessness and things that damn people to hell. But now, in America, it is just the ethos of even the Orthodox. And so the law of Christ somewhere is connected to the law of Christ everywhere. And This is why the Bible speaks like this. The Bible does not speak about the lordship of Christ in a way that is dualistic, segmented. Now, obviously, we know that the lordship of Christ over his church has a particularity. It has a distinctness. It has, I would say, a connected to headness. But that does not mean that the comprehensive kingship of Christ in other places, whether it's over the family, over the individual, right? Over the vocational realm, over the magisterial realm, over the national realm, it is somehow abdicated, neutralized, and then just shelved to the eschaton. And so my concern is that this kind of view of Christ, this Christology, is promoting a soft but true antinomianism for the Christian in much of his life. And here's the thing about Christians: most of our life is not in liturgy. Most of our life is not in some kind of ecclesiastical activity. Most of our life is in the spheres of existence where we are overseeing things and being overseen by someone. And when you have a spirituality which despiritualizes, right, and in some way either dismisses the lordship of Christ and his supremacy, you are promoting a Christianity that is de-Christianizing Christians in much of their life, and I have seen it.
Do you think
I've seen it? I mean, it's not like this is a brouhaha, the slippery slope, fear mongering. I mean, I've seen it. We've seen it.
So do you think that's why the gospel-centered hermeneutic and method of preaching pervades in those churches? Because you don't, like, what happens in the workplace, what happens in your neighborhood, what happens in your kids' schools, like, that's not the realm of the pastor to preach on. So we're just going to preach on looking to your justification. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically, the Proverbs don't matter. Ephesians 5-6, doesn't matter too much. Romans 13, I guess it kind of matters, but when you think Romans 13 applies to Nero, it doesn't really matter. All the conversations about justice in the Bible, all the conversations about how people live their everyday life now, right? They are somewhat, in some way, dismissed to this endless soteriology. So it's almost like the Great Commission is not to make disciples by baptizing them and teaching them everything that Christ commands about everything he speaks to. The Great Commission is, bro, it's like this is Lutheranism, bro. We come to church to be justified over and over again. Now, I'm saying this as a guy who preaches the gospel every Sunday. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like I'm preaching the second table of the law and I'm preaching some kind of like life skills on Sundays because we're already justified. But I find it interesting that when God speaks to the people of Israel, redeemed, about their rescue, it's not like, okay, let's now have a conversation about justification and expiation for the next 16 chapters. Starts talking about all of these dynamics in life, in agriculture, in vocation, right? In the gates of the city where people are conducting business. Like, the Lord has an interest to tell justified people how to conform their entire life, right? Take every thought captive to Christ in their various places of existence. Now, to be fair, people are like, oh, well, no one's saying that our everyday life doesn't matter. But in these categories, the way they're conveyed, it doesn't matter. it doesn't matter. I'm saying you can say it matters, but it doesn't.
It's almost like you can't expect anything. You just, because again, like you're accused of being like glory theology, glory, and it's like because you actually expect the Holy Spirit to produce in you something such that you can accomplish for the kingdom, and you will see fruit. That's glory.
Yeah. Your life should be holistically better in light of your union with Christ. It doesn't mean that you don't suffer. It doesn't mean that you don't get sick. It doesn't mean that hard things don't happen. But the blessed man prospers. And because I am blessed in Christ, and the ways of the Lord are things that he has promised to bring about blessings through. I mean, where Christians are, everything is better. That's historically the case. Daniel in Babylon. Yeah? What happened after Daniel was in Babylon? I mean, did things around him get better, at least for seasons? And so this idea that Christians are invisibly effective and life around them should not be better because of their spiritual life, it is utter garbage nonsense that has nothing to do with the Bible. It has nothing to do with the Westminster Standards. I mean, just read a 19:6 that speaks about the temporal consequences of righteousness. It is antinomianism. It is Gnosticism. And it has no place in our backyard. And I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm going to keep writing about it, It's what it is, bro.
Here's what it is. You're going to keep talking about it, but again, the critique is, are you combative? Are you able to co-labor with what is probably the majority? Because you've even said this is pervasive in our world.
Yeah.
Well, so you have to coexist with other Christians, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, I guess first of all, let me just say that I don't think that this view is the norm. I think that it is very loud. It has a lot of influence, but I don't think it is the normal pastors and normal elders are not into this weird Escondido stuff. They're not. They're two regular, real guys. Okay, these guys like Truman with their like the theology of the cross, and that is not the norm, but it is very pronounced.
You put Truman in that category?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh man.
Absolutely. I mean, have you read those articles recently? The whole.
Yeah, I read them. I mean, I could disagree with it and still say.
I did a whole podcast on it. So if anyone wants to delve into it specifically,
but that's my point. So then, is Truman for you somebody you can't view as a brother, or you can't co-labor with, or
no? I mean, it's not.
He's completely aberrant.
It's not a. Like, our brothers are wrong, and they need to be told they're wrong, and they need to change. I mean, that's what it is. Like, I don't know. Like, when I was like into R2K theology, the last thing that someone should do is be like, well, Aldo's a good guy, and Aldo's preaching a lot of gospel, and Aldo is, discipling people. Just leave him alone. No, like, call that person to consider their views. And I think one of the things one of the reasons why, for me, the conversation is heightened somewhat, because I think a lot of people in the world of ministry, they just need to like talk to this stuff, right? Let's talk to this stuff. Let's think to this stuff. Let's go back and forth. Like, that's a lot of people. But there's some people, they're beyond reason. They don't care. They have put their 10 toes down, and they are bent on obtusely promoting this and demonizing anything that is pushing back on it. And so I think it depends who we're talking to. So if we're talking to a guy who is confused about these things, or hasn't worked through these things, or believes that Jesus being the ultimate loser right now is the greatest thing ever, like, he's working through that. Okay, like, let's, like, where's he at with that? Like, have some good conversations with that, right? But with someone like Scott Clark, okay, who is rebuking the PCA for being unconfessional, right? Because we're telling the government to not kill people. Like that kind of person, in my opinion, who goes to that extreme, that intensity, having been warned and talked through and debated through, like that kind of person is more a person that they should be formally dealt with, and unless they changed, that. So it depends on who we're talking about. These things are things that we should talk about. These things are things that we should be teaching on and challenge each other on. But there are certain people, I believe, they have just chosen to believe that the entire Reformed world is not orthodox unless they embrace this craziness. So, for example, like with the whole law or gospel thing, there are some men in the church world that if you don't hold to this, everything is reducible to do or done, right? If you don't hold to this law or gospel paradigm, if you don't hold to some kind of republicanism, then you're a neo-nomian person who doesn't get the gospel. Those guys, let me tell you something. Those guys should be church disciplined, because they have created a view of the gospel that is not the gospel, that is not the actual. Show me anywhere in the Westminster Standards where it says everything must be seen as law or gospel or you're a heretic or you don't get the gospel. Those kind of guys are the kind of guys that the tone is different, right? Because
I don't know if this, I was hoping this interview was going to help you, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure this was.
No, because you've made your view of law and gospel that is yours, the gospel.
Right.
Right. And I'm saying this, and there's tons of men in the world of Reform that know exactly what I'm talking about. They're accused of not preaching the gospel because they believe in application, because they believe in temporal blessings and punishments, because they believe that law and gospel in a Lutheran paradigm is not the appropriate historic paradigm, and they're accused of not being gospel-centered. And it is those kinds of people that go there, right, that I believe that the polemics is to be heightened. But like if a guy's like, okay, like I'm not sure that I believe that magistrates should punish blasphemy. I'm not sure that the Sabbath should be enforced by governors. Like I don't think that Christ is going to make most of the world Christian. Like those guys that like are thinking on those terms, that's very different than what I just previously discussed. Okay, the sense like, so to be gospel centered is to be amillennial. Okay, and to be post millennial is to be a Judaizer. Like literally, that's the stuff that these guys would say. To hold to the establishment principle, okay, which is the Reformed norm, is to be a politicized person who doesn't believe that the power of the gospel changes people and the sword is the way we advance the gospel. Like it is those extremists that accuse people simply because they hold to views like that are different, that they are not in scope or in line with the gospel. Like that is the rabid, right? The rabid unhealthiness of that piety that I think should have no place.
But that law gospel distinction is believing it the way you're saying. I mean, there is law in gospel, and the issue is not that the law is not related to the gospel. The issue is if you're using the law for salvation.
Yeah, but
like imperatives are a part of the gospel. I mean, believe is an imperative.
That's the thing. Okay, good point. So, our tradition, it thinks like this: we must understand the law and the covenant of grace,
yes,
or the law and the covenant of works, because the law and the covenant of grace,
yes,
has promise. The law and the covenant of grace is gracious. The law of the covenant of grace is not negative at all. Now, the law and the covenant of
So
works,
ergo, telling Christians to be who they are in Christ in those things and to give imperatives is not to heap law on them. For example, it's not opposed to the gospel. Is my point.
So to say that, first of all, to say that the gospel is not purely promised either. That's the problem with that whole law and gospel paradigm. The gospel threatens you as well. The gospel commands you as well. Now, the gospel narrow, this is our categories. Listen to Burgess or listen to Rutherford. The categories we have, the law narrow and the gospel narrow speaks about justification. But the law broadly speaks not simply about my need to be justified by Christ, by his law keeping. The law broadly speaks about promise and graciousness and brings grace in my life, And the gospel broadly commands me and has exemplary paradigms that are imperatival as well. And so this law and gospel oversimplification, it leads to confusion about the gospel, confusion about the law, and a lot
antinomianism.
And antinomianism, and it's not our categories. So just because you can see Calvin say law or gospel, this is the problem with like people like Rich Lusk and these FB guys. They hear a word and all of a sudden their entire tribal baggage is inserted into the word. So when Calvin is speaking about law or gospel, he's not making a case for, Jihadist 40, if I'm even saying it right, Jihad 40, whatever, Lutheranism, law and gospel, polarity, okay? When Calvin says in his Institutes that the third use of the law is the principal use for the Christian, meaning that the Christian is not to see the law of God primarily as this, I can't do it and I need Christ to just, that is not the principal means by which I see it. The principal means that Calvin would see the law, and that's why the Westminster Standards don't have this huge diatribe about the law not being able to justify me, but they have this huge exposition primarily where? In the third use of the law, in the catechisms. So I understand the distinction between the covenant of works and the covenant of grace. But the law-gospel conversation in the spectrum of these folks, it is not reformed. It is not reformed, and it has a ton of problems, and it's the kind of stuff that leads people to being like, well, you know what? If you tell your kids to go over there because they've acted wrong, that's legal parenting, gospel parenting, but bro, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you know what the other thing about this, what I've noticed about this theology is it's effeminate and it turns off real men. It's effeminate and it turns off real men. And our churches are losing a lot of real men, and we're pushing them to these pietistic wackos in the Moscow world because of this ridiculous, esoteric, justification monopolized theology that reduces everything to like these just unpractical, very one-dimensional categories, and it's interesting to me that there tends to be a correlation between this theology and being dismissive of masculinity and male headship in society. It's intriguing to me that there's a correlation with this whole, that's the world, this is the church, polarity, dichotomization. There's a correlation with that and this dismissiveness of the need for masculinity and male authority in society. Because the second we get out of the pulpit and the minister, masculinity doesn't matter because that's not the gospel. That's not the kingdom of Christ or whatever. Man, this stuff.
Well, the law gospel distinction, especially because, again, if the imperatives are only there to show you don't measure up, then you don't have to actually work hard to accomplish anything because you can't accomplish it anyway, And so whereas men do the hard thing and we are goal oriented and we do want to succeed.
Yeah. So your problem is you want to accomplish too much and achieve too much, and your problem is you don't believe that the dominion mandate was only for Christ and it has nothing to do with you. No, that's not your problem. That's not our problem. The problem is we have too many men who can't do anything.
Right.
They can't
and they're
do
being
anything.
told, and they're being told not to do anything.
And
it doesn't matter what they do. Yeah.
And then you have this theology that romanticizes your loserness.
See, that's the stuff people want to know about with you.
It romanticizes. And look, bro, I understand brokenness. I understand the Psalms which speak, Lord, I'm broken. Lord, I'm struggling. Lord, I'm alone. But the problem is, there's more things to be said. There's more things to be said. And the Psalms bring us everywhere. They bring us everywhere. Prosperity and suffering.
So I wanted
triumph, right? And getting your behind kicked, But the second you talk about, you talk too much about your ability to clean yourself off and do something for Christ, succeed for Christ. It's like, well, you're not you're denying the cross and the suffering of Christianity. And it's like, no, I just believe in the ascension as well.
Right.
Okay. I believe in the ascension as well. Yes, I believe in the hope of glory, but guess what? I'm getting better now, bro. I'm not just waiting to be glorified. I am from glory to glory improving in this life. And so I understand inaugurate eschatology. I understand consummate eschatology, but I also understand incremental eschatology because the inaugurated kingdom is progressing, and Jesus is putting all things under his feet progressively, and the last thing that he will put his foot over is death. So there is a present reality, there is a present continuous reality, there is a consummate fullness, and there is a back and forth duality in the meantime, and we can hold all those things together, right? Rather than become those who tend to find themselves in some very narrow, exclusive part. Right?
I don't know if it's our modern education system, our worldview as a country, but what I find is even in my congregation, like people have a hard time with paradox and with holding things in tension. And so oftentimes they'll say, well, I didn't understand that, and I'm just saying, well, tell me about it. And basically they want me to put it in a nice box, seal it up, and and I'm like, nothing in Christianity works like that. There's a tension always. The already not yet tension goes to so many things. There's suffering, yes. There's glory, yes. There's failure, yes. There's success. That's not prosperity gospel. That's the Christian life, But they if it's not wrapped up in a neat bow and you can just put it in a box, and it's like, no, we have to work these things out. I think that's part of maybe what you were saying about you can walk and chew gum at the same time, or do
we can pray for God to destroy people groups that hate Christ. And we can pray for God to save people groups that hate Christ. Like that's in our theology. That's in our piety.
No.
Like we don't have to. Like the thing is, like just be a psalm singing, believing Christian.
Let's go there. Okay, hold on, because that's where I want to. That was the other thing. We're gonna get there now. So part of it, this was the eschatology piece, the public theology piece, the R2K, and that's all related. And your views on this create tension oftentimes with those on the right. We're all supposed to be in the same camp, and yet there's some division there. And then the latest thing, I think, is when a lot of these questions were coming up with the Psalms, because you've heavily been promoting exclusive psalmody. Is that right?
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Well, it's very broad. I can go all over the place, but
well, no, I don't want you to do. I know you've done 5 podcasts, hours and hours, 10 hours. But basically, what is your? We as the PCA have. I guess we would be considered inclusive psalmody, but your argument is most churches aren't even doing that. They're not even including them, and you believe we're commanded to.
Yeah. 21.5 singing of psalms with grace in the heart is one of the elements of worship. So, the Baptists changed that to put singing of psalms and hymns because they knew what that meant. I believe that psalm singing is biblical. And
what Baptist? What
the 1689 confession, London Baptist Confession, they changed that because they knew exactly what it meant. Actually, I'm coming out with a podcast where I go deeply into the assertion that the Westminster 21.5 does not mean that. But let me just say this. I think that part of the other conversation we're having is related to our music, because all this talk about how we see the kingship of Christ in a more comprehensive, more creaturely and on the groundness, I do believe it's related to our music. So, a lot of these guys, that they're obsessed with everything being law or gospel or soteriology or justification or redemptivist. They're obsessed about that, and they seem to want to stay there in some unhealthy way, and they can't seem to have that as a center and then walk around the center. Well, part of that is because if you listen to our hymns, okay, our man-made music, if you listen to, I've sung them all. I've been been a Christian long enough. They are mostly about soteriology and private devotion. Now, obviously there's more to it than that, but generally that's what you get. And so when you are constantly singing the words of Christ in a way that is very soteriology heavy, it is part of the issue. So I don't think the psalm singing and the words of Christ that sing about all the things that are in the Psalms that I believe touch the, Luther said it is a little Bible. The Psalms are like a little micro of the macro. I do believe that part of those issues are related to the heavy soteriology, one-dimensionalness of music. And it can be very solid, but it's still one-dimensional. So that's one thing. But the other thing I would say is that my goal is not to make, I'm not saying I could do that anyways, but like if I were to say, what is your goal? My goal is not to realistically have everyone in PCA be exclusive psalmody. I don't think that's realistic. That would be great. I think we would be better. But I think everybody should be inclusive psalmody. I don't think there should be any church in the PCA that should be allowed to not sing psalms every single Sunday, unless you want to change the confession, because our confession commands the singing of psalms. It doesn't command the singing of the hymns. It commands the singing of psalms. And we should be singing God's words. God commanded those words to be sung. Psalms 95 does. Ephesians 5 does. Colossians does. James does. 1 Corinthians does. The confession does. We should be singing the psalms. And so part of my desire to make us better, to help us grow, to challenge and sharpen, is to promote psalm singing. Exclusive psalm singing, I believe, is the way to go, but inclusive psalm singing is my realistic goal. And the reality is many churches don't sing any psalms, hardly ever. And if they do, it's some kind of like paraphrase, hacked up summary. It's not actual, singing like the psalms. And I don't think psalm singing belongs to the RP church. I don't think it belongs to the FCC. I don't think it belongs to the Joel Beakey denomination. I think it belongs to the Reformed world. That's our tradition. That's Calvin. And so I hope that those conversations would provoke the need for us to be inclusive in our psalmody, at least. So, but I don't think I've been. I
think that's when that's when the questions really started coming up. Like it's almost like it's so extreme to be advocating,
but it's not
for that. I know
but it's not. I mean, like, not historically. We were all psalm singers, for a long time. Even in America,
all what?
Psalm singers.
Oh, in our history.
Yeah, just read the preface to the Bay Psalter, which is the first printed book in America. The Americans coming here and talking about why we sing psalms. Like, psalm singing is certainly not the practice of the universal church, but it is very much the norm of the Reformed Church, right? So we're not, Lutherans would be different, Episcopalians would be different, and Baptists would be different, but like we're like from that line of Calvin and Knox, and so we need to get back to psalm singing.
Are churches or pastors of churches singing if they're not exclusive psalmody?
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, this is
what do you want me to say, bro? I mean, no.
This is what I want to tell people. So he said it. Our church certainly isn't exclusive psalmody. We try to be inclusive, and I'm fighting a lot of battles on a lot of fronts. Yeah. And so, but like the last 2 weeks, we have had psalms. But we're still friends, even though he just called me a sinner.
No, well, I mean,
like people, dude, people can't take. They can't take.
I'm picking on myself, bro. I mean, like I was sinning for years, and like I was wrong. But I mean, just to summarize it, like, remember RPW says it's not, we can only do the things that God, we have to avoid the forbidden thing, but it's also the commanded thing. And here's the thing, I find nowhere in Scripture which tells us to make our own music. Nowhere in Scripture, so we don't do it. But I'm gonna go to church in August that is not EP. But yeah, I think it's sin to impose on the church man-made music, which God, the Lord of the church, has not commanded his church to be done and imposed. I think it binds the conscience, but I'm not. I don't know. I think it's wrong, but I mean, I think that it takes time to get there. It takes time to think about it. I think, I get it. If people don't do it, I don't think you're like, oh, you must be some like liberal, Book of Judges pastor. I'm not saying if you're not there, but you just probably don't understand it. I think the average guy.
Well, some pastors may be there, but their churches. This is one of the things the drum I kind of beat. You can't judge a pastor by the church he pastors, because our job is to take a church from one place and to, through discipleship, present them complete in Christ. And hopefully there's reform, but you're not going to come in and get what Yeah.
But yeah, we should be singing psalms, more psalms.
Are you exclusive psalmody now? Is Pinelands?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You are?
Yes, we are.
Instruments?
Halfway there. We're halfway there. We're halfway acapella. Hey, man, it takes time, man. People worship them things, bro. They got to get weaned off. Like you can't take people off of heroin right away; they'll die. Like you gotta wean.
Yeah. So I do want to wrap up a little bit here. So one question I had gotten besides is Aldo okay is Aldo leaving the PCA?
No, I'm not.
Because then they always ask, well, where would he go? And by the way, if anybody said, I heard you're going to the RPCNA, you might have to blame me for that, because not that I ever said you were going there, but like, again, people engage me and they say, well, is Aldo leaving? I said, no, I don't think he's leaving, at least not now. He's part of the PCA, and where would he go? I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, the RPCNA. I said, maybe he's got a lot of friends in the RPCNA. So my point about that is not that you are going, but I've affirmed that you have some affinity with him. Rumors spread fast, man.
I appreciate the RP world. I appreciate the FCC world. Church College.
Would they have you?
No, I'm not reformed enough. So, I think that. So I wouldn't talk a lot about it, but I think the RP world is, in my opinion, it's very similar to the PCA as far as like their theological identity issues. Their worship is better, but I think that it would be better for me to hold my views where I am now than to go there. If I were to ever become more reformed denominationally in like the future, the FCC would make more sense because I see they don't have identity issues like the NAPARC world does. So I think the OPC, the RPCNA, the PCA, the ARP, OPC, those are the ones that I always refer to, but I know there's a few more. They have identity issues, and I think that it's not going to be dramatically different where you are, other than like, there may be some things like, for example, like in RP church, you're always going to get psalm singing. So yeah, I think for me, the best place for me to work out my views about the Reformed tradition would be the PCA. But one thing I was, wherever you are, I think you have to be yourself, be a part of the denomination that you're in, and also, seek to be about the change that you want. But yeah, I'm not leaving the PCA anytime soon. There's a lot of good guys in the PCA that are about a lot of good things. And yeah, I appreciate psalm singing, but I just put it this way, like female officers is something I don't want to deal with, I'll just put it that, that's just that's wherever you go, you're gonna find something that's just gonna be all over the place unless you join the FCC, which is a very small new denomination in the U.S. So yeah, I'm not going anywhere anytime. I'm not saying I'll be in the PCA forever, but I did. To be honest, I did have a period where I was like, man, like, could I be here forever? But the good thing about the PCA is that I guess it's good and bad. So guys can be as reformed as they want to be in the PCA, but guys can also be very not reformed in the PCA, And so I can be a cappella psalm singing only TR text. So we only use translations from the Text Receptus church, right? That doesn't celebrate anything in Christmas and doesn't have Christmas Day. We can be that in the PCA and no one's gonna like punch us in the face. Well, at least in South Florida Presbyterian. I don't know. Maybe I was somewhere else, I'd get in trouble. But you can practice your views in the PCA if you're doing intinction and having interesting things happen that are not very confessional, and you could go the other end of the spectrum. So I'm here, man. I'm here.
There you go. There you go. If you have questions for Aldo, reach out to him. He'll talk about them. Yeah. Bro, it's always good hanging with you. And for our listeners, so I was ordained at the same presbytery meeting where Aldo transferred in to the PCA from the Baptist world, I guess. And yeah, when he mocks the seminary you went to, you can just tell him, yeah, well, you went to Masters.
I learned the languages, just not what you do with them theologically.
Oh man, man. I'm trying to think what else. I guess that's it, bro.
I think. I did express a lot of the things that I had a concern with the PCA, but there were some other things I didn't bring up. But I guess I could throw in there. So yeah, one of the things that we were talking about with amongst ourselves and others, like what is your major issue with the PCA? And I'll just say them like real quickly. Our constant inability to actually convict as guilty sinful men. So we have a reputation for, in many situations, chasing people out with overtures. But when Peter Larthart gets tried, when Greg Johnson gets tried, when certain things come to the courts for conviction, they don't. So that bothers me that we struggle, I believe, in the PCA with discipline.
Let me. I know we're going to do these quick, but that is so important because the people continue to be a problem in Christendom, and so
they say
like
they say they're exonerated.
Yeah, and like so, Lightheart obviously has a thriving. He's got a thriving ministry with no shadow on it, and then Greg Johnson is now taking the PCA's Revoice Side B problem he's trying to into the EPC. And I know many of us are like, who cares? It's the EPC. Well, it's amazing. I got a local EPC pastor. I think he's in the presbytery that wrote the overture that they were trying to pass there at their last assembly this summer, which was just like the one in the PCA, because they're saying, no way, we can't let this guy in. We're not letting Side B in here. So the point is, because we failed to follow through and discipline was vacated and he left, now another denomination is going to face this scandal, trauma, tension, distraction,
Law of God. I believe that the PCA is when it comes to things like the second and fourth commandment are very, 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 very antinomian. And so those are concerns of mine. First table law is not secondary, but it seems like second and fourth commandment is somewhat of a taboo thing in the PCA. The massive broadness we have in worship. So obviously I'm not making a case for, unless everyone in the PCA is no instruments and a cappella, no instruments and psalm singing tomorrow, like it should burn to the ground. But our broadness in worship is an absolute joke. It's a joke. Like, there are PCA churches that look like Hillsong churches. There are things that happen in worship in PCA churches that provoke God's wrath in serious ways. And so we need to have a real enforceable denomination, and we need to have enforceable doctrines and standards on worship, and we couldn't even do that with preaching. So I think the looseness of worship, the total or most abandonment of psalm singing, the tendency for the committees and commissions that are more, the groups in the PCA that are more permanent to be very large. I'm very concerned with how huge a lot of agencies are, and I'm very concerned with how they don't represent, I believe, the average churchman. And so I think these agencies and committees have become large, massive, complex, and very oftentimes not representative of the whole body. We talked about being anti post-mill, being anti-establishment. I don't think the PCA should be if you're not post-millennial like I am, historic post-mill, you should be thrown out, or if you don't hold to the establishment principle. But I do think that it's very difficult to call yourself a Presbyterian and to be rabidly anti those things, like they're evil. The R2K stuff, republication shouldn't exist in the Reform world, the all those things, the law and gospel polarity. I think the amount of wokeness that exists in the PCA is still very pronounced. There is a lot of wokeness. Effeminacy and egalitarianism is a problem. We saw that in our GA on the floor, the things that were being spoken, the things that were being said. We don't know who men and women are. We know that women are not supposed to be elders. But as far as like how they are to act in church and what they do and don't do, what they do and don't do in society, there's too much egalitarianism in the church. I couldn't convince our presbytery to do anything about a woman teaching Sunday school, teaching the Westminster standards to a mixed body in church, because it wasn't the pulpit, So the egalitarianism is a problem, and that's why this guy, is writing the stuff that he is writing. I think the amount of allowable exceptions in the PCA is extraordinary. Good faith subscription never works. Yeah, that's something that I think is a problem. And I think that there's too much Anglican popery in the church. There's too much Romanism in the church when it comes to Lent and all of the extra holy days and whatnot. And I think we have a problem with creation. There's very strange views about creation that are allowable in the PCA that you know what I'm talking about. Creation is very important, and creation is growingly becoming something that is somewhat
When you say creation, do you mean the moment of creation, or do you mean creation around us, like the natural world? What are you talking about?
I mean everything. I mean the way we see the first few chapters of the Bible.
Yeah, man, bro. I mean, I just wrote a piece about, believing Adam came from a hominid or a pre-existing being is out of bounds in the PCA, and guys are arguing against it. And I wrote that because I know of cases of it, and it's horrific that would even be allowed, and the presbytery didn't care. So
yeah. I mean, didn't Keller argue that he believed in some kind of like bio?
Well, he was with Biologos, and they argued for theistic evolution, and I think there was even an article on there that questioned whether Adam was real. But Keller affirms a real Adam, but like how God made Adam, how we got to Adam.
So God picked some guy God picked an ape and turned to a human and made him Adam. That's basically the gist of it, right?
Yeah, and there's men that believe, like, what they'll say is they're saying, well, I'm not saying that's how God did it, but he may have.
Yeah, that shouldn't exist.
Of course not.
That shouldn't exist. That's just
yeah.
That's just nonsense.
The exceptions are, I mean, I've seen routinely 5 exceptions. Guy comes with 5 exceptions. That's not even
Second commandment,
abnormal.
Fourth commandment,
creation,
right?
Marrying Catholics.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, that one is rampant. And then what the heck was the 5th? I'll have to look it up and tell you. It's easy. It's 5 though.
Yeah. So that's an issue, and I think I appreciate Strain his talk on confessionalism. That was helpful.
David Strain, yeah.
But I do think that the big issue too is that we have denominations within the denomination, and this is kind of like, I guess this is a symptom of the other problems I've been talking about. So basically, you can go to a presbytery that has an entirely different view of what it means to be reformed than the other. I mean, it's night and day. You know what I'm saying? So I think that the fact that we have presbyteries that are so radically different, it's almost like we're functionally congregational. And we have a bunch of the PCA cannot be reduced to its national identity, but pretty much where you land geographically is the PCA you're a part of. And how does that work? How does confessionalism work when, if I go to Rocky Mount Presbytery, this has actually happened, a guy can not be transferred there because he believes in the establishment principle, you know? And then you go somewhere else where they're like, hey, if you believe that we can make images of Jesus for your kids, you can't teach that. You know, like, it's like a PCA within the PCA. And I think that's, talk about peace and purity of the church. Man cannot even go from one place to another in peace and purity. They can't even relocate because of a mass amount of disparity, you know. And that's not Presbyterianism. That's Congregationalism with some Presbyterian stuff sprinkled on it, you know. And that goes. So those other things that we talked about would I think feed into that. So those are some things that, you know, I have a problem with. I'm sure you would have those problems too, but maybe you don't think about them as much as I do, or think about them as bad as I do.
No, all those.
But one thing I've come to realize is that, like, the OPC has those problems. The ARP has those problems.
They all have the problems. I think
our PCA has those problems.
Yeah, the problem, the issue is because we're the biggest, and like it seems to me like we're the only denomination that is trying to like produce thought leaders for like American Christianity, and so like everybody in PCA. I mean, you and I have podcasts, whatever, but there's people within the PCA trying to reach beyond the PCA, and that's why it seems like it's bigger in the PCA. I mean, you just don't hear about this in the ARP, but then you talk to those churches and they have a lot of variety. But again, there's not. I guess what I'm saying is the PCA has activists, and these other denominations don't seem to.
Yeah,
they're just
not as known.
Maybe.
But yeah, like I think I just came to like an epiphany, like. Wherever you go in Naples.
You had a vision? Is this
I had a vision.
Revelation?
Vision.
Jesus calling?
Wherever you go in Naples, you're going to have to do a lot of work to be laying the tread for a growing historic Presbyterianism. And so who is going to fight it with you? That's the thing. Like wherever you are, who is willing to fight? Because this is the thing that people don't realize. Every point in history, there is something unique about it, right? There's something particular about history. And what I've come to conclude is that this 2024, July 10th, is a time of decline. It is a time of decline, corruption. It reminds me of the book of Judges. And in times of decline and corruption, what is the necessity? Necessity is confrontation, renovation, restoration, reformation, contention. Like the idea that like we're too reformed or we're too worried about reforming, it's ridiculous. I don't know where you live, okay? Like you don't know the times, like it says, like the sons of Issachar, like it's time for us to fight for our day and age of restoring the beauty of what has been passed down to us. And it's funny to me, men love to read about Knox and Calvin and all these guys. They love all that stuff, but the second that anyone encapsulates a little of that ethos now, they're viewed as some kind of, I don't know, just strange, obtuse person. But the reason why things are
combative, schismatic, immature. I mean, like there's all kinds of names that people put on. And I think the point you made earlier is good. It's like when you see the way these guys used to debate in the past, I mean, guys would be put under discipline now if that were the case, and then you speak boldly about things and it offends everybody. And I do think that speaks to the effeminacy that just has taken over our day and age.
That's another thing. Another issue is, I mean, I've heard Nate Zander say this. I've heard, Michael Foster say this. I've heard you say this, Zachary. Like, there's like an effeminacy in the reform world that is huge. I mean, it's just guys that are just they get their feelings hurt very easily. Whenever you talk about things that are distinctly masculine, like strength, courage, right, boldness, protection, they get bothered by that. And I mean, like there is an effeminacy in the church, right? And you could see it on the floor when people are like, I can't believe that we're even having this conversation. Like, what will people think about us if we're saying, like, there's an effeminacy in the church, bro. And it's not godly. It's not gracious. It's not Christ-centered. It's pathetic.
And it offers people no guidance or hope. Like this Sunday, I've been preaching in Genesis. Is awesome. I'm only in chapter 2 and just talking about the man and the woman. And, I made this as part of the application. I said, men and women are different and we need to be promoting masculinity and femininity. And the Bible says, I said something like this, like to be a man, to act like a man, and to dress like a man. And so parents, affirm your son's masculinity, And then I said something similar for women. Well, do you know how many, it's the first time I've ever had parents of teenage boys tell me their sons commented how much they loved this sermon. And when I dug, what was it about? It was like, man, I know I talked about godly masculinity in the intro and then again at the end. And it was I preached for 45 minutes, whatever. And it's like, man, these 16-year-old boys are craving that because what are they experiencing all the time?
Yes.
Don't be a man. Don't be a man.
Yeah. Don't, godliness is not being manly. It's being Christ-like.
Right.
What is that? That's Gnosticism.
Yeah, be a doormat. That's the best hope you can give a guy.
Men are going to church. They're going to Reformed churches, and they're being groomed to be abused. That's right. They're being groomed to be abused and to be soft. And bro, this is what I was talking with Foster. This is why people are going to these immature guys in the strange post-mill world. This is why. Because they're looking at us bro, look at this guy, bro. Look at this guy. He has nothing to offer me. He has nothing to challenge me with. He's just grooming me for abuse in heaven. And men are wired differently. God made us different. And they're going to look for a Christ-like man who embodies masculinity somewhere. And they're finding it in unhealthy places. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
And I think Reformed theology, bro, is the most masculine, bro. I mean, just look at where we come from and look at what men have said and what they have done. You know what I'm saying? The titles of their books. The blasphemy of the horrendous, fornication of the Lord. They just look at their titles of their books, right? Just look at the way they spoke. Look at the things that they did. Look at the things that they wrote. Look at the things that they suffered. Like John Knox, he's on a galley ship as a slave because of his theology, right? And you got these guys on the PCA floor. What is people gonna think about this? Guy's on a ship because of his theology. He doesn't care what the Queen thinks, what people think, if it's biblical. And the Roman papists are making everyone worship a Mary statue or something, right? And he gets up one day and he picks it up and throws it overboard in the ocean and says, "Enough with that, bro." This is our history, bro, and it's a masculinity that is loving, that is protecting, that is fruitful, that brings peace and prosperity, right? That's the thing. Like true masculinity, strength that is comprehensive in the pastorate, in the home, it brings a beautiful environment for women and children to thrive and be protected.
That's right. It's
not about some kind of, dominance that is destructive and toxic and so on. But effeminate men lead to men and women being abused, church members being abused by the devil. And I think that these things that we're talking about should become more of the ethos of our world. It should become more of the ethos of our world. And when, for example, when Stephen Wolf, says, "Hey, pastors shouldn't be fat." How does a man process that? You know what? The glory of young men is their strength. I should take care of myself. It would be good for me to make the most out of my body. You know, I do have a body. My body does matter. Christ died for my body. And you know what? Like, me sitting around and just eating and just indulging is not manly. Like, you know, that's a good thing to think about. But what happened when everyone was all, oh my goodness, I can't believe you say that. I mean, like, bro, that's effeminate.
You know, well,
you know
it
what I'm
is.
saying? Like, it's effeminate. Like, you
Right.
can't even talk about, like, you being, like, healthier, you know, and being more mindful of, like, you know, stuff
Right.
like that. Yeah, whatever.
Well, and that leads to weak pulpits, right? Because, I mean, he was saying that about pastors, but the truth is pastors, like so many of them, live in absolute fear that they say anything to make somebody feel bad about their state. And it's like, my job's not to make people feel comfortable in their bad state. Like, I mean, yeah, look to Christ, be comforted in Christ, but like,
you make people better, bro.
yeah.
You make people better in the Lord.
And you give them hope.
Yeah.
You give them. I preached. Man, I know this is longer than normal for me. I preached.
So that's because you have me on there, bro.
I know, bro. So in Genesis, I preached on work, and I said the title of the sermon was "Work to Live," and you know, people say, "Don't no, it was "Live to Work" was the title of the sermon. Anyway, it was about the value and the dignity of work. And of course, but at the beginning I talked about, and what I'm talking about here is more than simply a paying job. It's the labors you have to do for life, you know. And so it could be in the home, or it could be you have a job outside the home and then you come home and you have responsibility. Like, you have to do certain things. I know I have a young lady in the church who has debilitating illnesses, and she's only in her 20s, and she feels tons and tons of shame that she can't work full-time jobs, that her dreams have been dashed because of these. She has like 3 diseases. After the sermon, it dawned on me, I wonder how she received that, because I hope I didn't heap shame on her for that, you know. And she sends me this email before I could even get to her. "The Lord uses you," she says. That was the title of it. "You know, I've been struggling with blah, 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 blah," and this sermon is all about working for the glory of God, and she's unable to do it, and yet somehow she found, you know why? Because she cares what the Word of God says.
Yes.
And she found hope in the Word of God.
Yes.
And I wasn't afraid to say, like, I didn't have to do death by 1,000 qualifications on why this doesn't apply to you. Don't feel bad.
Yes. Yeah, that bro, that is a great example. So going back to the other thing, like so, for example, you say, like, hey, like, you know, man-made music is sinful. You know, like, instead of, like, somebody processing that and personalizing that and getting personally, like, offended about that, like, hey, does the Word of God really say, let me think about it? You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, like, if we process anything, like, is God really saying that? Instead of, like, are you saying that, like, I'm not, like, you know, great, or I got problems, or, like, you know, like, I'm not, you know, like, bro, how great would that be? That instead of, how does this make me feel, my friend feel, so-and-so feel, like, is this what God wants and says? Man, like, that's good. That's healthy.
Yeah,
that's necessary.
Right. And so I have both things going on. On one hand, if I make somebody feel uncomfortable, I get to hear about that. But then other people who are just pliable by the Word of God, they are happy when it reaches them where it needs to. She didn't feel any shame from that. She knows the situation she's in, and she felt the grace of the gospel. She's glad for what she can do, you know? So, Amen. Yeah, man. Well, this was great. Any final thought? I mean, you give me a lot of final thoughts, but.
Yeah, I think, my final thought would be, I do think that I have plenty of room to grow in my ability to speak publicly about my convictions. So I don't know. I did say a lot of things that was kind of like vindicating, like, my posture and positions, but I do think that, like, yeah, I could chill out some. I could learn nuance and long suffering and wisdom and things. So I don't think that, like, I don't think that anybody who ever has any questions about me in any way is totally just some kind of like soft person who can't handle the truth. I do think that like I can overwhelm people at times, and you know, the Lord is helping me through that. So that would be the last thing I'd say.
Dude, that's awesome. That
He's like, all right, maybe if they get to the end of it, you know, they won't be mad at
they're not listening to an hour 40 minutes of this podcast. But no, this was really good. But I mean, I and by the way, I found that with you, and I think on this, like, yeah, you called something sin that would include me, and I mean, but again, we just don't get offended the way people do. Anyhow, this is Aldo Leon. He's the pastor of Pinelands Presbyterian Church, which was Harry Reeder's first church, by the way. Should have said that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Definitely check out Kingdom Polemics. You'll learn a lot. You'll see his views that initially sound crazy, especially when he tweets them, are actually they do, bro. Are well thought out and will make you think.
Anyways, we gotta end, bro.
All right, bro. This is George and Aldo signing off for the P&R Churchmen.